Welcome to the Danny Clinkscale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Insightful and witty commentary, probing interviews, and detours from the beaten path.
Welcome once again to Danny's Weekend Sports Wrap. Well, it was another weekend where it was a football game that doesn't count in any way, shape, or form and is very difficult to analyze and is very difficult to talk about in any serious fashion. But that's what we are supposed to do, is to try to glean things from something that isn't even supposed to be gleanable, if that's even a word. But that kind of overshadows the Chiefs and Steelers, overshadowing games that really do count, although the game for Sporting Kansas City was a vital game, and the games for the Kansas City Royals, although since they were playing the Mets, it did raise up some memories, were absolutely not vital in any way except to the opponent. And so there's lots of different things to talk about on different levels, and some of it puts a smile on your face for the wrong reason, some of it puts a smile on your face for the right reason, and we'll try to sort it all out, tuss it all out, give it a few, as I'll explain later, caveats and disclaimers. All that is straight ahead. Come on along.
Before you spend your time and money going after an MBA, ask yourself why. Is it so you can tell people you got your MBA? So you can add a line to your CV? So you can call it a CV instead of a resume? Truth is, any MBA will do that. On the other hand, if your goal is to learn how to successfully manage and grow a business with real-world insights from experienced professionals, well, consider getting your MBA from Park University. Our low student-to-teacher ratio gives you personalized attention, and our face-to-face and online classes offered in 8-week terms are designed with working professionals like you in mind. No wonder the Kansas City Business Journal ranks Park University as the top MBA program in the area. Classes begin June 10th at all 4 KC area locations: Parkville, Downtown, Independence, and Lenexa. Visit park.edu to get started.
I was duped, and I recommend you be next. For better or worse, the ultra-realistic impression of me sits now in my wife's office to spook her on a daily basis. So what is Doob? D-O-O-B. It's the keepsake of a lifetime, a 3D-generated, incredibly lifelike figurine. 66 cameras take an image at exactly the same moment in any pose, and state-of-the-art 3D technology transforms that into exact replicas of you, anyone you know or love, a pet, whomever is close to your heart. Create lifetime memories with a Doob. Visit their Facebook page at Doob 3D Kansas City, or better yet, see their incredible creations. Visit their location down on the plaza in the heart of it at 231 West 47th Street in KC Mo. Doob, be next. Sumner One is the company to make your office maximize efficiency. Their family of companies make up one of the largest independent dealers of office technology in the Midwest. They are proud to bring the best service and technology to top companies across the region. Sumner One can help your organization run more smoothly than ever. Sumner One printers, copiers, MFPs, managed print services, document management, infrastructure design, IT services, disaster recovery, and business continuity. Welcome to the one place where everything works. For more information, call Carl Little at 913-752-2256. As I mentioned in the open, I have a new phrase that I'm going to use for NFL preseason games. These should be called caveat disclaimer games. Whichever little thing that you want to do to sort of mute any opinion about football that doesn't count, be it caveat, if you want to be a little more fancy, or disclaimer, certainly fits when you're talking about NFL preseason football. First of all, the game between the Steelers and the Chiefs in Pittsburgh was played after an hour delay. There was lightning in the area, not much rain. In fact, I watched the Chiefs game on DVR later in the evening after covering the Sporting Kansas City game, and when I was settling in for the Sporting Kansas City game, it was about 6:45, and I opened up my computer, and the Chiefs weren't playing yet. So I looked at the story from NFL.com. It said there was weather. I went to Weather Channel in Pittsburgh, and it said that there was an inch of rain per hour predicted. That was, I don't know, that was from some other day or some other time because it hardly rained at all. I looked at the radar then, but my first inclination was that maybe this game wasn't going to be played at all. And I don't think it would take that much for a game to be called off in the preseason. And what crossed my mind and flashed across my mind very quickly is that it actually would probably be a good thing if the game wasn't played at all. But in the end, it was. The paying customers, such as it was for a preseason game, got their football, and Chiefs fans got very little of Patrick Mahomes. Mahomes was slated to play the entire first half, but ended up playing just 2 series, and they were rather ineffectual. Maybe it was a combination of the fact that the field had been rained on. Maybe it was the fact that in those first couple series, the Steelers were having their way with the Chiefs' offensive line, and maybe they decided that there was too much peril for one Patrick Mahomes. But anyway, all they got was 2 series, 1 series of 5 plays, 1 series of 4 plays. They got 1 first down. Mahomes was 2 for 5 for 11 yards, 2.2 yards per completion, and horrors, a 47.9 quarterback rating for the evening. His best play came on a scramble and slide, and the best thing about that was that he was sitting on the sidelines by the end of the first quarter, and never to play again, and totally healthy. In the end, there were a couple of injuries that were going to be had, but they weren't to significant players, and that's another thing that you always notice about preseason football, is the fact that things that are noted or notable aren't necessarily all that important. So let's look at some of the positives for the game. If, as I said, and using the phrase caveat disclaimer for all of them, Chad Henne was pretty solid in the game. He's important only from the standpoint that if Patrick Mahomes misses a game or two, you want somebody who's at least competent, and we know that Andy Reid can scheme things up and make people look better, so the Chiefs likely would still be a reasonable offensive team under Chad Henne. And the other quarterbacks, Chase Linton, Kyle Shermer, get to play some. I don't know how significant that is in any way, shape, or form. Darwin Thompson, the rookie running back, has continued to look well, so that is good. Carlos Hyde had a couple of nice runs, but he fumbled, so maybe Thompson is making up some ground on Carlos Hyde as far as that position group is concerned. Well, in a game that you lose 17-7, you're going to say, well, the defense was pretty good, and it was. But here's your disclaimer again, or your caveat. Ben Roethlisberger didn't play in the game, although the first-teamers did play pretty well. Pittsburgh was able to run the football in the game, and the touchdown run that the Chiefs' defense allowed was a calamity. It was a walk-in, basically, for the Steelers. But James Conner got consistent chunks of yardage in his runs. He averaged almost 5 yards a carry without running any particular run more than 7 yards, so he basically got good positive yardage on every carry. Jalen Samuels averaged 6.5 yards a carry, so that was a slight bit of a negative, but there were individuals who looked good. Tyrann Mathieu came out of the game, so that meant more extended and important play in the backfield for the defensive backs, and they stepped up, to say the least. Juan Thornhill continues to look good and be somebody that people, I think, are expecting to be a really good player. And cornerback Herb Miller flashed a little bit as well. And there were other notes of a positive nature in the game also. But in the end, once the first 18 minutes of the game are played, it almost becomes irrelevant, except for the guys who are fighting for that 52, 53, 54 spot on the team. 53. There is no 50. Well, the 54 would put you on the practice squad now, wouldn't it? Frank Clark played for the first time this season, and the injuries, as I mentioned, were to players that might, if you want to stretch it, be considered somewhat important, as on a couple of Chad Henne's more spectacular plays, long throws that were caught by tight end Deion Yelder and wide receiver Marcus Kemp, each of the players were injured on those particular plays. Kemp is more important because he's considered one of the key special teamers for the Kansas City Chiefs, and Yelder is in the battle for the backup tight end, which has been something that has been talked about probably too prevalently, but the Chiefs do like to use their tight ends in a big fashion, so maybe that matters more than it seems like a backup tight end battle should matter to me. But on this night in Pittsburgh, there were things to glean if you cared to glean them, and there were things to maybe roll your eyes about because it was a very sloppy game. Football players are ready to go and get fired up, and then they have to sit around and cool their heels for an hour. That's not particularly conducive to good football, and there was a lot of not-so-good football out there where there were 4 turnovers by the two teams combined and fumbles by Henne and the aforementioned Carlos Hyde for the Chiefs. So It's a night where if you want to analyze, you can. If you don't want to analyze and just look forward to the fact that in just a couple of weeks there'll be real football played, you can. Training camp has now broken. All of the practicing will be done at the practice facility now. Practices will start to maybe take more shape as far as what the actual season is going to be playing out. Of course, we don't get to particularly see all that much of that. Players will start to leave. There'll be less players to work with. All of this is really just fodder because there's such anticipation for the season. Everybody's looking forward to this season with unbelievable excitement, and they should. And if there's any news about football whatsoever, fans will gobble it up. I was listening to the Sports Radio 810 post-game show, and one of the callers to the show mentioned that he had been up to many practices in St. Joe. I mean, that's a great fan. That's an excited fan. Somebody who wants to go watch a bunch of football practices, you got me. But I've seen hundreds and hundreds of them. Maybe that's why it's not so exciting for me to see those. But for the fans of a team that is the Super Bowl favorite, that's something that you want to see. Darn it all, the Chiefs lost on Saturday night. Caveat, disclaimer. Game that had much more import was in the other kind of football, and Sporting Kansas City played at Children's Mercy Park, and they were in dire straits entering the evening. As of a couple of days ago, they were 10 points out of a playoff spot. At the end of this evening, they would be 6 points out of a playoff spot after a very scintillating 2-1 victory over San Jose. I plotted out how I was going to approach this game beforehand, and I decided that I would watch the first half of the game from the press box, which is a vantage point higher than any fan in the stadium sees. It's at the very top of the stadium on the west side, and I would watch the second half from the stands. It was a good crowd, but befitting the fact that Sporting has lost a lot of games of late, and the Chiefs were on TV, and the Royals were playing as well, it wasn't packed in there. And sure, the seats were, the tickets were sold. They were. So I knew I was going to be able to get a spot to sit and observe the game and pick out where I would most like to watch it. So the way it played out was that in the first half, up high, you get a more tactical view of the game. It's more like watching chess pieces moving around, and I was talking to somebody, and they said that when players go up and watch a game from up there, when they're injured, they sit in the press box area, or actually a row right in front of the press box. They always note how easy the game looks from way up on top, and I would note that dynamic as well. I've obviously seen many games from the press box. I've seen many games from the stands. But I figured for the purposes of this, I would kind of pay keen attention to the differences. Well, the differences were jarring in the fact that in the first half, San Jose was by far the better team, and in the second half, Sporting Kansas City was by far the better team. So that was a little bit difficult to make a judgment on. But what the up-high view in the first 30 minutes especially showed was a San Jose team that was just running rampant on Sporting Kansas City. It was great that Sporting got out of there with just 1-0 down. In the end, San Jose would take 15 shots in the first half, and these weren't just, flailed attempts from way out. Almost all of the 15 had some danger element to the play that was leading up to it, and that was a record 15 shots in the new stats era that started in 2010 when they started using more sophisticated technology for stat keeping. But a lot of the intricacies of the way that San Jose was playing were visible from up top. They were really playing the ball excellently to spaces, not just to players. And their corner kicks, of which they had several, were really sophisticated and interesting. They hardly ever used just a standard curling in-sweeper or out-sweeper. They generally crisscrossed two different players. They sent the ball to spaces that you ordinarily wouldn't try, and they were a constant danger on the corners. But then the one time that they just used an ordinary flip of the ball into the box, somehow the Sporting Kansas City team decided that Chris Wondolowski, the leading goal scorer in MLS history, should be left all by himself. There was no player within 3 yards of Wondolowski, and he tapped the ball over Tim Millia's head for a 1-0 lead. And at that point in time, it looked like Sporting was flat. They were not energized. You just had the feeling that they almost were like, well, this season has been so tough, and we just haven't been playing great soccer, and the energy just wasn't there. And they've been playing several games in a short period of time, so Ilie was not playing in the game. That was evident. They were playing a couple of guys in different positions, and it looked